Okay, I'm going to stop the screen share and we'll start our meeting, Kathy.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Davison. I'm a member of our AAUW program committee. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome all of you here to our October general membership meeting. We have a great program lined up this morning, so I'm ready to get started. We are pleased to bring to you this morning our 3 LD2 legislators who will bring us up to date on current legislative matters, provide a preview of the upcoming legislative session, and perhaps highlight some issues that may warrant our advocacy. I'd like to introduce each of our speakers in the order that they'll appear this morning. As an aside, before I begin the introductions, I wanted to add that while we are a nonpartisan organization, I know that you as voters are well aware of the status of our panelists relative to the current offices they hold. So I'm going to include an update on that in each of the introductions. Our first speaker this morning will be Senator Andrea Dalessandro. Senator Dalessandro is a member of our AAU branch and has been in the Arizona legislature since 2013, first as a representative and then as a senator. Senator Dalessandro has been a high school math teacher, a small business owner, and a college professor. She has focused on education and in particularly on education inequities in terms of funding. Senator Dalessandro is the ranking member of the State Senate Education Committee. Other priorities of hers include healthcare and the environment. Senator Dalessandro has an MBA from Rutgers and is a CPA. She is currently term limited in her position as a state senator and is running as a Democrat for a state house seat. Our second speaker this morning will be Representative Daniel Hernandez. Representative Hernandez has served as our state representative since 2017. He's an Arizona native. Prior to his serving in the state legislature, he was on the Sunnyside Unified School District's governing board. While a student at the University of Arizona, Representative Hernandez worked as an intern in the office of Gabby Giffords and was with Gabby Giffords and assisted her when she was shot while at a Congress on Your Corner event. Representative Hernandez has a passion for social justice, education, shoring up the infrastructure, and protecting healthcare. He is running as a Democrat to retain his seat in the Arizona House. And our last speaker this morning will be Representative Rosanna Gabaldon. Representative Gabaldon has served as our representative in the Arizona House since 2013. Prior to that, she was a member of the Sahuarita Town Council from 2009 to 2012. Representative Gabaldon's priorities include funding public education, infrastructure, and working towards obtaining sustainable water supplies. She is the ranking member on the Natural Resources, Energy, and Water Committee. Representative Gabaldon serves on many local civic and nonprofit boards. She is term limited in her position as a state representative and is running as a Democrat for the state Senate. The format this morning will be as follows. Each speaker, in the order that I introduce them, will make his or her presentation. Following each presentation, we will have a short Q&A with that speaker before we move on to the next presenter. I'd like to remind all of the people in the audience today that we would love to take your questions, and I would love to pose those questions to our 3 representatives. So you have a Q&A button. If you're on a computer, it might be at the bottom of your screen. It might be elsewhere. But we'd love you to use that Q&A button to type in any questions you may have at any point during the presentations. I'll be scanning those while our speakers present, and then we'll pose those questions that you ask. So without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce to you Senator Andrea Dalessandro.
Hi. Thank you very much, Kathy. It's my pleasure to be with you. And it's a pleasure to be a member of AAUW Green Valley branch. It seems like yesterday Judy took me as a guest to the meeting, and I could still remember that years ago it was Planned Parenthood was the presenter at that meeting. I'd also like to give a shout out to AAUW statewide for their feature of several candidates who are running throughout the state, and in particular 3 that are working to change the majority in the legislature. Kathy Connect, a former teacher of the year, Coral Evans, the mayor of Flagstaff, and Judy Stahl, all running for the House. So that was very nice. And also Felicia French, who's running for the Senate. They are all terrific candidates, and I've been getting to know them better over the last few months. I am in a unique position as a current senator and as a candidate for the House. I have my feet in 2 places. So while I participate in the Senate weekly caucus meeting, I'm also planning for the future. I'm actually running to be the majority whip because I'm very optimistic that my party will take control of the legislature, and that'll make your job advocating for healthcare, environment, and education a lot easier. It's a different playing field. And I just want to let you know the process that I and others are leading currently. On the top of the list, one of our current legislators, Jennifer Pollack, who is an educator from the Chandler area, she has been having Stronger Schools meetings that I've attended since it started out being a response to COVID, and now it is morphed into, we actually have a document with our priorities, including more funding for special education and gifted, more funding for schools in general, for better teacher salary, and also, which is COVID-19 is an overarching issue to getting our economy up and running safely and for getting our schools up and running safely. We're doing this with, we started with education. I also am the senior member of Senate Judiciary, and we've been working jointly with the House on criminal justice reform. And we will be addressing election issues, including initiative process, which has been under attack. The healthcare, our staffs in the House and Senate and healthcare have had a humongous burden because they've been tracking the COVID, where the outbreaks are, where the testing is, where the people unfortunately have passed away. So we get updates from them all the time, and they're just starting to work on their healthcare priorities. I will also be I'm currently one of the top environmentalists in the legislature, and also currently the state lead for the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators. And both Sierra Club, which has endorsed me, and the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, as well as a branch of the the League of Conservation Voters, their Latino effort, CHISPA, has endorsed me. As I said, the COVID-19 is an overarching issue. It has been horribly treated by the governor. We were very happy in the beginning because he gave, through Daniel Hernandez's efforts, support for the Green Valley Hospital as well as the hospital in Nogales. But after that, you know, we've been disappointed. We were disappointed that we didn't have blitz testing in Green Valley and Santa Cruz County. And, you know, we're still fighting all of those issues. I am, you know, the proven progressive. I'm the top rated progressive out of the 90 members of the legislature, and I'll just keep fighting for these things. I'm so happy to be here, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Senator Dalessandro. One question that we had was, do you expect Proposition 208 to be successful?
Yeah.
And if so, well, and then the follow-up is, do you expect the intent of the proposition to be honored by the legislature?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And I did have signing in my foyer during the COVID. Yes, the polling is very, very positive for Proposition 208. But I have to caution people, the revenue will not kick in until 2022 because it will be effective in 2021, but it's not until people pay their taxes in the following April, the individual taxes, that will be sure of the money. So I believe it will pass. I believe that we will keep to its intent because it's been very carefully written, and that but it won't have an impact until 2022 when the 2021 tax returns are filled. And just a reminder, it taxes the top 1% of the individual income. A person, a single person making only their excess over 250,000 will be taxed, and if it's a couple, over $500,000, only that amount. The excess over that will receive have to pay the surtax, the 3.5% surtax. And I'm especially when we flip the legislature, there's a better chance. And don't forget that in order to mess with a voter passed initiative, you need 2/3 vote, and that's not going, that's not going to happen. So I'm very optimistic. It's a good thing.
Good. Another question that we have is that, as you know, one of the major issues for AAUW as a whole is pay equity. And we were just wondering if there had been any legislation introduced in the legislature relative to pay equity. I know several other states are considering legislation. I just wondered where that was here in Arizona.
Well, I will tell you that there are advocates for it. I probably signed on for it, but Kathy, we have over 1,000 bills filed every year, and generally they don't come to my attention unless they're really good, really bad, or come before my committee. So I'm sure that we will be introducing that again, as well as the Equal Rights Amendment. And I know a lot of your members are interested in that too. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there a bill that did not pass last legislative session that you would really want to advocate for?
Yes, as the ranking member of Senate Education, I had to applaud Senator Sylvia Allen, who lost her primary. She had listened to a gentleman in Tucson for a number of years, and she had a bill to to adjust the funding for special education students. And there was a big dollar ticket attached to it. So that was one that I was very sad that was got through Education Committee. And I actually stood up on the floor, and President Fan had to tell Senator Allen to be quiet and listen what I was saying, because it was really a good bill, especially for us. I know many of our members live in the Continental School District, and because they provide very good special ed services to their students, they attract more. Last time I met with the superintendent, it was 17% of their students were classified as special ed, in a varying degrees of severity.
And last question, you mentioned Continental. Do you expect Proposition 450 to pass?
I certainly hope so. It doesn't increase the taxes, and I've been messaging that, and I'm also doing a plug for a write-in candidate. It's nonpartisan. I'll tell you, she's not a Democrat, but I have interviewed her, and she's a write-in candidate. Her name is Kelly with an E, Kelley, Allen, Allen. And I'd appreciate if you haven't cast your ballot, if you would vote for her, because unfortunately it's kind of like some people are getting elected and they're not really supporters of public education.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Dalessandro. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And now we'd like to hear from Representative Hernandez.
Thank you, Kathy, and all of the folks on the executive board for allowing us this opportunity. I'm a little disappointed we couldn't do this in person, but obviously, given the circumstances, I'm glad that we've all shifted and adjusted to make sure that people are as safe as possible. So I want to commend Senator Dalessandro. She was a really great partner when we were looking at how do we deal with the COVID-19 crisis, particularly around testing in Santa Cruz County. So because of her, we were able to expand the testing facilities and actual have a blitz, which was what we'd been doing statewide around Maricopa County and in Pima County, but only in Tucson. So her advocacy really was able to get that done to make sure that our constituents in Santa Cruz County had the resources they needed to get tested. So I wanted to talk about a couple of different things that came up. The first having to do with pay equity, since Kathy brought up that issue. There was a bill that was introduced by my colleague and friend, Representative Kirsten Engel, who's now running for the state Senate, that would have required there to be transparency in pay so that people could know where they were in terms of their colleagues' pay. And this was a really great bill. I was a co-sponsor. The bill didn't get heard in committee, as a lot of bills that were introduced by Democrats in the last couple of years have not been. I think it's less than 10 bills were actually gone through the entire process, and only 4 or 5 of those were actually signed by the governor out of the 1,700 or so bills that were introduced. So pay equity is an issue that I think a lot of us care deeply about. We plan on reintroducing some version to make sure that we are actually holding companies and employees accountable to make sure that people are not being compensated at a different rate just because of their gender. I know that when I worked at an organization, when I left, my deputy was promoted to my position, and I talked to her about the salary, and I found out that she was being offered $25,000 less than I was. And the only difference was I was a man and she was a woman. So I've seen it both on the nonprofit side, I've seen it on the corporate side, and it's something that we really need to address. The last 2 years that I've been in the legislature, in my second term, have been really interesting and really difficult for a lot of reasons outside of just COVID. In 2019, I was actually honored to be the Women's Healthcare Champion. It was one of the first times in recent history that they'd had a male member of the legislature win the Women's Healthcare Champion Award from the College of Gynecology and Obstetrics. But it's because of the work that I did to make sure that we didn't keep attacking women's reproductive health. And that's one of the things that we've seen year in and year out at the state capitol. So I was able to work with a handful of moderate Republican women to stop a bill last year that would have funded what are called crisis pregnancy centers. Crisis pregnancy centers are usually run by religious organizations, and they don't provide adequate or accurate medical information to women. So they are usually trying to discourage women from seeking all forms of reproductive care, but they don't actually provide certified and licensed healthcare for the most part. There was an appropriation that was going to be done for $7.5 million, $2.5 million over the next 3 years. And I was able to work with all of our Democratic colleagues in the House and the Senate and a couple of moderate Republican women to stop that from going through. Because while we should be investing in women's healthcare, we shouldn't be investing in these fake healthcare centers that don't actually provide the care that women need. I was also the lead on a sex education bill that was really important, but also controversial. The Senate President, Karen Fan, actually didn't even assign either the very conservative bill or the very progressive bill to committee, because we were able to mobilize a broad coalition, including business owners, to say that these kinds of pieces of legislation were not a priority and that we really needed to look at what the funding situation was for education instead of trying to roll back the laws going back another 20 or 30 years. This last year, we had a lot of things that got stopped in the process because of COVID. But one of the big things that I want to hopefully take up next year is continuing to make sure that we are providing medically accurate and scientifically accurate information so that young people are being educated about themselves and their bodies, that we're really looking at fully funding education, because to Senator Dalessandro's point, we are not going to get the money from Invest in Ed should it pass right away, and we're going to have to continue making general fund investments in education. There's an issue that I think might be of interest to some of your members that I worked on last year with my Republican colleagues, and that was the issue of the school counselor to student ratio. Arizona has one of the worst ratios in the country, over 900 students per counselor. I was able to work with my Republican colleagues, including the chair of the Appropriations Committee last year and a handful of folks on the Senate side, to get it so that we could create a school safety grant program where school districts and charters could apply to either receive money for a counselor, a social worker, or for a school resource officer. While a small step, it was really meaningful because what we saw was that there was a need. When we put out these school safety grants, we got $98 million in applications for $20 million worth of grants. So we know that there's still a big gap that needs to be met to making sure that our students have the resources to be able to be successful. The other thing that we, I think, really need to start focusing in on, and then I'll hand it over to Kathy for any questions that might have come up, is what are we going to do with the university system? While K-12 has been a priority and has been a topic of conversation for most people for the last decade or so, we often forget to talk about the importance of our higher education system in the state of Arizona, which has been woefully underfunded, about $1 billion less than where we should be right now for the university systems. Our schools at the state of Arizona, for the University of Arizona, NAU, and ASU are no longer state universities. They're state supported. And that distinction is important because that means that they're getting so little funding from the state that the majority of their funds don't come from the state of Arizona. They're coming from a combination of things like grants, research dollars, or innovations that folks like Michael Crow are making to diversify their ability to generate revenue. What has happened, and I think is a big problem that we need to start talking about now that hopefully we'll be able to stop worrying about the hemorrhaging that we have with the lack of funding for K-12 education, is what are we going to do to shore up our universities? Because what has happened is the creation of a model that's unsustainable. As we have cut university dollars, tuition fees have gone up to make sure that in-state students get scholarships. So a high tuition, high financial aid model is only sustainable for so long. And what we really need to do is go in and make sure that we are putting in new dollars to shore up our universities and not tying those dollars to any one thing, because one of the biggest mistakes we can make for our higher education community is to say, we'll give you $1 million, but it must be for this program or that program. What we need to do is fund the university systems and work with them to make sure that tuition remains affordable for all Arizonans. And the last thing I'll talk about, and then I'll hand it off to you, Kathy, is looking at our community colleges. Pima Community College and Maricopa Community Colleges are one of the most underfunded by the state. They actually receive $0 in the most recent budgets because there have been cuts that have been made. We have Santa Cruz Provisional College in Santa Cruz County. We need to make sure that we are really putting money into our community colleges to make sure that we're shoring them up, especially during these difficult times, so that they can continue to provide a pathway to higher education for Arizonans who may not be ready or may be wanting to pursue a four-year degree, but want to get some kind of certificate or degree program to be able to better their lives. So, Kathy, I'm happy to take any questions, but I hope that kind of answers the big things that I've been working on, which have been protecting reproductive health care, making sure that there's equity. I actually introduced the elimination of the pink tax, which would be a sales tax exemption on feminine hygiene products for the last 4 years, and I've got it passed out of committee twice, but never made it to the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Hernandez. One question that we had relative to community colleges, can you explain the Pima Community College ballot initiative?
I cannot explain it very well. I just know that for me, one of the things that the Pima Community College Initiative would do is it would increase the annual spending limit for Pima Community College by about $11 million, which means that the school would be able to spend more for operational purposes. So very similar to what we do when we have a school override, where they're able to go beyond the allotted limit for their funding. So I think thinking about it like a school override is very similar, but obviously the system for Pima Community College is a lot bigger with many campuses, but it would allow them to be able to spend about, I believe, $11 million more. And I can get you the exact number after we're done with the call this afternoon.
Great, thank you. Another question relative to education. What can we do in Arizona to help attract and retain qualified teachers? We've all heard a lot about the issue with, a lot of classrooms not being taught by certified qualified
Teachers.
staff. Yeah.
We have about 1,100 classrooms right now in Arizona that are either not filled or being filled by underqualified substitutes. And I think that's a big problem. I served on a school board from 2011 through 2019. So I know intimately how difficult it is to be able to run a school system when you don't have enough qualified teachers. So I think the first step that we need to look at is, what do we need to do to make sure that folks stay in the classroom longer? The average person who comes in as a first-year teacher only stays in the classroom for about 3 years right now in Arizona, which means that more than half of them are leaving the classroom after the first 3 years, and that's a big problem. So we need to incentivize by creating professional development opportunities, and I think that's one really big one that we don't oftentimes talk about, that if people don't feel like they're being successful, people don't go into teaching because they want to make a lot of money for the most part. They go in because they care deeply about educating the next generation. So making sure that we're providing professional development opportunities so that they can improve, so that they can be better teachers, I think is going to be critical. One of the ways that we can do that is by creating systems where we give master teachers who have been in the classroom a long time stipends and the ability to help mentor newer, younger teachers. It's a model that we worked in Sunnyside and we saw very effectively how having a mentor teacher was really helpful in encouraging younger and newer teachers to stay in the classroom, where otherwise, if they didn't have that support system and that mentor, they might say, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm messing up. And me messing up means that the children are not getting the quality education that they need. Additionally, I think we also need to look at, when we are talking about education and teacher pay, we cannot separate the two issues. We have a problem not of qualified teachers, but enough people staying in the classroom. There are more than enough qualified and certified teachers in Arizona that live in the state. The problem is they choose to leave the classroom because if you have to work 2 jobs outside of being a teacher to be able to make ends meet, it's not something that you're going to continue to do long term. In Sunnyside, we had situations where we had teachers who qualified for food stamps. And that's not a situation where we need to be having our folks make the decision of, do I want to stay in the classroom and work another 2 or 3 jobs, or do I go on food stamps to be able to feed my family? So we need to talk about teacher pay as a part of the teacher retention issue. And I think the other thing is we need to expand the Teachers Academy to not just teachers, but also bring in school counselors and social workers, because we know that we need to have wraparound services and we need to look at the entirety of the school system. And that's something that I think people don't realize, that when we don't have music and art teachers, when we don't have these specialists at the elementary level, our teachers who are with these kiddos all day get burnout. They don't have time for planning periods. When they get to the higher levels, we see that one counselor to 700 or 800 students is not enough to make sure that we're preparing kids to go to college. So having those support systems and those wraparounds make sure that we have a good scaffolding system for, but also it helps avoid teacher burnout, because if you're able to have a planning period during your elementary grades, because you have a specialist, a music, an art teacher, or a PE teacher, that is a great ability for you to make sure you're caught up on grading and lesson planning. So there are a lot of things that we can do, but I think the biggest thing is, until we actually fund a lot of these programs, it's going to be impossible for us to have the conversation of how do we keep people in the classroom when they're getting paid wages that are not living wages. And I think that's a big thing that we need to really address.
Thank you. And last question.
Sure.
Is there a bill, or what would your priorities be for the next session? Is there something that didn't pass last time that would be a priority for you? Or what kind of, when you go back into it, what will be your big push?
Yeah, I know Andrea will get mad at me when I say this, but I still want to get my feminine hygiene product tax exemption bill at some time before I leave the legislature. Maybe not next year, but I'd love to be able to get that done, because I think for me it's so fundamentally unfair that people that menstruate have to pay a higher tax than other folks. So that's one bill. And then a really quick plug on a second bill. I've been working on non-discrimination legislation, and I actually worked with Republicans on this for the last 2 years. It would make sure that people cannot be discriminated against because of who they are in workplace, housing, or public accommodations. The Supreme Court recently ruled that there are no workplace, there's no ability for folks to discriminate on LGBTQ status for the workplace, so you can't be fired for who you are anymore, but you can still be denied housing and public accommodations in Arizona. So that's going to be my big top priority going into next year.
Okay. Thank you very much, Representative Hernandez. We appreciate your time, and I know you may have to leave us for another commitment, so we really appreciate you being with us this morning.
And what I'll do, Kathy, if that's okay, is drop in my email and social media. So if anybody wants to get in touch, they can reach out that way.
Great. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you,
our
Kathy.
last speaker this morning is Representative Rosanna Gabaldon.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate this opportunity, and to everyone at the AAUW for this opportunity to actually address you this morning. Again, I'm Rosanna Gabaldon, and I have been your representative for the last 8 years in the State House. And it has been such a great pleasure and honor to represent you in that capacity. And it's wonderful to be able to work along with Senator Dalessandro and Representative Hernandez. Before that, as mentioned, I did serve on the Sahuarita Town Council, and it was a great pleasure to actually serve in that capacity, because that experience actually, when I went up to the State House, gave me an opportunity to express how the state impacts our municipalities, and they do, they very much so. So it was a great honor to bring that experience. And also, as mentioned, I do serve on several not-for-profit boards, and it's because I like to give back to my community, and that was ingrained with me, in me, with my parents, who actually did volunteer all the time that I was growing up. My dad as Knights of Columbus, my mom being our, my troop leader and the Girl Scouts, et cetera, et cetera. So that is something that I really enjoyed, being your public servant and actually continuing to serve in other capacities for our communities. In regards to the legislature, it's been a great honor to be the ranking member of the Natural Resources, Energy, and Water. And throughout my 8 years that I've been at the State House, I have served in some capacity on each, in the natural resources, energy, water, agriculture, land, etc. But the last 6 years, I have been the ranking member of a committee that actually addresses some of those topics. Also, I was able to serve on the Transportation Committee this past session, and I have to say that is one of my priorities, and I'll be talking a little bit more about my priorities in a little bit. I want to share with you how important it is to work across the aisle. My colleagues had expressed some of those comments, but I have to tell you, it's something that has really helped me, and it's just that being able to talk to not only my caucus members, my fellow caucus members, but also to talk to my colleagues across the aisle. And I think that's very important to share that, is because if we don't listen to each other, we're not going to get anywhere. So let me talk a little bit about my priorities that I have, and I will continue to advocate for. And we live in a COVID world. The virus is impacting the state of Arizona, and I'm sure every one of us knows somebody who has been impacted by the virus. I've had family members that actually have contracted, and luckily they have been able to get through that and been able to test negatively, but after a very long healing process and getting through that. Also, public education, that was talked about earlier, but my definition of public education is early childhood development, K through 12, community colleges, universities, but also adult learning. We are all lifelong learners. So JTED, CTE, and also to be able to have, these programs either through our community colleges or through labor, where they have apprenticeships. That is so important. So public education really is about everything from what I listed. Also, infrastructure and transportation, as I had indicated, it's very, very important that we look at our our infrastructure and our transportation. Some of our roads have not even been repaired or looked at in 50 years. And I'm talking about more rural areas in our state. But keep in mind that roads are very important to a lot of the income that comes into the state of Arizona, if it be through tourism or even just to get John Q. Public to work. And so again, investment in transportation and infrastructure is very, very important. And according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, the state of Arizona receives C's and D's in grades in regards to the quality of our roads, our bridges, and et cetera, et cetera. Also, water, sustainable water is something that is very important to me. And as I mentioned, I've been serving in that some sort of capacity to address that at the State House. But also, I just want to share with you that in regards to water, my three concerns is contamination, depletion, and subsidence. And so I would love to talk to any of you if you want more information regarding our next bucket of water that is coming. Also, economic development that ties into our educational system. We really do need to work on that, and that is one of those conversations or the topics that we need to work with our colleagues from across the aisle. Economic development is going to bring in those sales dollars, and it's also going to bring in jobs. And what's most important is creating those jobs. But again, it's the investment in our public education system that's going to do that. It's going to help economic development as we continue to grow as a state. And so let me talk a little bit about. It was a great honor and privilege to actually work with my fellow caucus members as well as my colleagues across the aisle, because I actually had a bill signed by the governor, and that was to address public safety. So it does happen. It's communication. It's working on common sense, but also we do have topics that we both agree on. We have a tendency of focusing on what we disagree on, but actually we do have topics, we do have bills, legislation that we can work on as a complete legislature. And so I think it's very, very important that we continue to do that. In that capacity, I served as the minority co-chair for the Rural Caucus. And why I want to share that with you is because these are individuals and they're nonpartisan that actually came together, and we talked about issues that impact any county that is not Pima or Maricopa. And I have to say that there was some joint and common issues, and one of them was broadband, being able to have internet throughout our state of Arizona, not just in our urban areas, but all through our suburban and rural areas. And that was something that had a conversation, and that conversation continues when in regards to what's happening with COVID in our public schools. Also, I talked about water. It's been a great privilege and honor to have the Democratic leadership ask me to be the delegate on what was the drought contingency plan, which was something that brought stakeholders, elected officials, the Central Arizona Project, Arizona Department of Water Resources, to come together to talk about the Colorado River and how we can bring surface water and how we can continue to have water in Lake Mead so that we could have that next bucket of water in regards to surface water. And then also public education was something, again, that we continue to look at, we continue to address. And again, this is something that I want to share is public education is our foundation. If we don't have a strong foundation, we can't build. So also, I had forgotten to mention that DCP has ended, but also I continue to, and again, with great honor through the Democratic leadership, I serve on what's called the Arizona Reconsultation Committee, the ARC, which we continue to look at long-term, long-term solutions to our surface water along Central Arizona. But let's talk about outside of Central Arizona, outside of what's called the active management areas. And that is something that we continue to address as legislators, and again, bipartisan. And so I wanted to kind of continue to talk about that. Now the future, excuse me, let me get some water. In regards to the future, and and bills that I have introduced that I'm going to introduce again. One of them is, I don't know if you're aware, but there's a statute, there's a Arizona revised statute that actually prohibits any of our state agencies to talk about green gas emissions, so climate change. And so I'd like to repeal that. And that was something that I introduced last legislative session, and I will again on the next legislative session. I think that's very important because climate change is all about, we talk about the environment, we talk about our water quality, our air quality, and so on and so forth. So that'll be something that I'll reintroduce. And also, one of my colleagues had introduced equality. Two of the bills that I introduced that never made it to committee was actually to have a third option on driver's license and IDs through MDD for non-binary. And so I think that's very important that individuals can have a choice when they get their driver's license or ID through the state of Arizona. And also I introduced legislation that would address having the gender of the individual who has passed away and to reflect that on their death certificate. So there's so much that I wanted to speak to, but I know my time is ending. So I just wanted to say that I am your public servant. I look forward to being your next senator. I ask for your support. And Kathy, I'm ready for my questions. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Representative Gabaldon. I know you've been very involved with water as a resource. What should we be doing in Arizona to promote clean water and ample water?
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that question. And we're all in it for the long haul. We're all in it to do that. So what you can do is actually advocate for clean energy, for a sustainable water supply, for good quality of our air. And one of the things that you can do is actually be vocal in regards not only to the state, but to your local officials. Be able, if there's something that is occurring, bring it to the attention of your local officials. Any of us that are serving you in the legislative district too, because it's very, very important that we can't do this alone. It takes a village to actually do things, and as legislators, we need your assistance to bring up those issues that if it be contamination or if it's the bad air quality. So again, what you can do, each and every one of you, and please share this with everyone that you know, is actually keep us accountable. Make sure that you remind us that we are going to be here for a very long time. And I'm reminded constantly by students, by younger individuals that sit there and say, well, we're going to be here a lot longer than you. So please help us protect our earth.
Well, and related to water, again, we had a question from one of our members. Does the non-soon season that we just had with limited rain or no rain, how does that impact things for us relative to water?
I'm so glad that someone asked that, and thank you very much for the question. In regards to that next bucket of water, science is saying, and again, we are the state of Arizona and the Southwest, we have faced a drought for the 20 plus years. And so in that regards, they're looking at how we can address that, how we're going to bring, and again, when we bring water, this is what we're talking about is actual surface water that goes along the earth. When we talk about our groundwater, that's finite. The water that's underneath the ground is something is already there. So how are we going to address that? One of the things is actually looking at technology to actually treat our effluent and recharge it back into the earth. And one of the things is actually looking at technology, and it's happening already. One of the water utilities in the state of Arizona is using what's called purple pipe, and that is gray water. And gray water actually is going and getting treated and then recharging back into the earth. And that increases the water level in our earth. So again, thinking outside the box in regards to how we're going to look at that next bucket of water. And again, part of that is through what's called ARC, which I had mentioned. We're talking about that, but again, ARC is only focusing on Central Arizona. What we need to do is actually work on other parts, and legislators have come together through different stakeholder meetings to actually talk about what we're going to do next legislative session in regards to water sustainability, our environment, and so on and so forth.
And last question, Representative Gabaldon. I was just wondering what the next steps are you think we as a state need to take relative to COVID-19 and the pandemic, and what measures we need to kind of look at now?
Well, that's an excellent question, and one of the things that we as a Democratic caucus on the House and the Senate, we've actually worked on or discussed how we're going to address that. In the next legislative session, we're actually going to address the $240 on unemployment, which is way too low every week. And so we're going to actually look at presenting legislation to actually increase that. People are living in poverty, and it's unfortunate because of the virus and what's happening in the state of Arizona. Another thing is actually requiring contact tracing, being able to testing, being able to find out where that source is, so that we can address, so we can keep those numbers down when it comes to the number of cases we have, and unfortunately how many Arizonans we have lost due to this virus. Also, looking at our public schools and being able to address that, and as my colleagues have mentioned, public education is very important, but how are we going to help them with the hybrid, where students are going to school half the time in the classroom, and then the other half is at home. So again, that's a lot of how we're going to address actually being able to have adequate PPE, and then also being able to have them have the tools in the toolbox to actually have this, to clean up, to actually prevent further virus and that and so forth. So again, and then also I addressed broadband, being able to have the internet. So again, and there's other things in them, and other topics, but I want to share one more regarding the COVID is actually assisting individuals that cannot pay their rent or mortgage. We've had the assistance, but not enough, and it's unfortunate that our governor has held back funding for that, but we continue to have to push back. And again, it takes a village. It takes all of us to push back in regards to our governor to sit there and say enough is enough. You're not doing enough to address this. So again, COVID is very important, and we as Democrats in the House and the Senate, we are actually having those conversations. So day one, when we become the majority, then we will have the agenda set.
Thank you very much. Before we sign off, I think Senator Dalessandro, you had a couple of questions that were asked that you wanted to address.
Okay, thank you for unmuting me. Just to comment on the community college proposition, that does not increase tax. It just allows them to allocate their existing funding in different ways. And the community college has really evolved under the Chancellor Lambert's leadership. It's not the way it used to look 10 or 12 years ago. He's done an amazing job. And right in LD2, they have an aviation program that is outstanding, and other things. They're being very responsive to technology and to employers in the district. And, so it's very positive, the things that are going on there, because they really are creating new jobs for our area. The three of us represent the airport and Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and the Air National Guard. So a lot of those jobs connected with aviation are very important to us.
Thank you.
Kathy, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Senator Dalessandro. That was wonderful. In regards to our community colleges, we do have a provisional college down in Santa Cruz County, and one of the bills that I actually had introduced in that regards is that our constituents, actually the taxpayers, do pay into Prop 301, but they get no benefit from the taxes that are actually accumulated or actually paid through that. So there was a bill that actually introduced to actually repeal. And it's just one line in regards to provisional colleges, so that Santa Cruz County Provisional College can have that to have that funding. But also when we talk about the provisional college and community colleges, we talk about workforce development programs, and that's very, very important. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Kathy,
Yes.
I also saw the question of, how can we get and retain more teachers? And a lot of Proposition 208 goes into that. Number one, and unfortunately, even more teachers have left because of the safety concerns with COVID-19. Every school district is different, and they have different resources and different ways of responding to the COVID-19. So that is a really important issue. So if we had someone that was near retirement age or had comorbidities, they were more likely to leave the profession. And unfortunately, that is true. So Prop 208, 25% of the money will be for teacher pay. And there are also allocations for technology, which is really good, and also for the Teachers Academy. And we're trying to do a lot of outreach to recruit more teachers from minority communities, because they're actually going to be the majority in Arizona soon. And students relate better to teachers of their own ethnicity, whether it's indigenous people or Latino people. It's great to have teachers from your community. And it's been really difficult for them as the university tuitions have gone up. And it's in violation of our Constitution, which says that our universities are supposed to be as free as possible. I know if I was a young person now with my family's limited ability to pay for college, I would not have been able to go to college. Unfortunately, I grew up in another time and in another state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I would really like to thank all of our presenters today. It's been a very interesting and informative program. I could sit and listen and talk and ask questions for quite a while, but unfortunately we have more of our meeting to go. But we really appreciate the time that you all three spent with us this morning and the insights that you provided. And so thank you very much for being with us. We're very grateful and very grateful for your service. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Stay
And
safe.
I'd now like to turn the program over to our co-president, Phyllis DeBertine, who will conduct the business portion of our meeting.
Well, first of all, I want to thank our guests for a very enlightening program. They covered many of the issues that we all care about, such as healthcare, education, pay equity, water, climate, and perspectives on current things that we're going to be voting on or have already voted on. I think one of the comments that they made as far as what can we do is keep us accountable. And I think that's something we need to continue to do. I want to thank, first of all, welcome to the business part of our meeting. Susan Peterson, my co-president, had planned on doing this part of the meeting, but she's not feeling well. And so I'm going to cover it to the best of my abilities and try and cover everything that she wanted to relate. Unfortunately, I don't have her fine sense of humor, but I'll do my best. And I will be reading a fair amount just because I want to make sure that I'm covering it in the way that Susan wanted to. And Susan, if you're watching, I hope you're feeling better. First of all, it's the AAUW's mission to advance gender equity for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy. We really encourage you to visit AAUW's national website at aauw.org. They have many different things that we can watch and learn about from the all kinds of programs that they have. And it helps us know that we are meeting our mission statement. Several of our members, including Susan, attended the webinar presented through AAUW Legal Advocacy Fund, Perspectives in Justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Our AAUW CEO, Kim Churches, and her remarkable staff offered insight into the connection between Justice Ginsburg's mission and that of AAUW, which really are very, very similar. You can view that program at aauw.org website or at AAUW YouTube video. Next, Barb McAlpin and her committee are very pleased to report that we now have 121 members, and that's just very encouraging. This has been, I think membership committees had a hard job with COVID and people being in different states, not able to return or not willing to return to Arizona at this time. I want to thank Barb and her committee for all their work. They made personal phone calls, personal pleas to people, and 121 members down from 100, and we're around 150, I think is pretty remarkable. I think also that our programs continue to be very engaging, like this program and the one the previous month and the one coming up, that's what's going to keep people coming back for our meetings. Also, Barb wants you to know that Shape the Future membership is still available to newly joining members. And for more information on that, please contact Barb. Another thing to be aware of, the Green Valley AAUW board did approve the purchase of a second Zoom account for interest groups. A list of interest groups is always listed near the end of your newsletter. And I've contacted most of those people about being able to access the Zoom account. If you have an interest group and you want to be able to use the Zoom account or something for AAUW business, if you would contact me, I will make sure that you get that information. Also, stay in touch with the newsletter because near the end, it will list all the different meetings that people have. Susan Peterson wanted me to announce that she's going to be leading the nonfiction book group, and they're going to be meeting the third Wednesday of the month at 1:30 in Arizona time. So be aware of that, and that will be in the newsletter. Another exciting thing that's going on, I think, as you know, the state AAUW gave a grant of $500 to each branch to further our mission to support education at the local level. And lest you think nothing is happening, let me disavow you of that thought. Two groups of our members met with the staff at Continental School here in Green Valley to see what their needs are. In addition, the Public Policy Committee under Karen Lewick's leadership heard a presentation by the superintendent of Continental School District, Rosanna Rico, about their needs. Their most desperate need was for Chromebooks for the first and second grade classes so that they can maintain the equity of education that the upper grades have. Your board voted to donate our $500 grant to Continental School District for this need. And with that seemingly as seed money, donations from other individuals and groups have grown to the amount of $16,800. And Continental School is nearing their goal of a Chromebook for every student. If you want more information about this, please contact Sharon Rizak Anderson, who's our liaison for this. That is pretty amazing, from $500 to $16,800, and it's staying at the local level. Another project at Continental School that you might be interested in is one that a young man working on his Eagle Scout project envisioned. The school is building a brick pathway, and you can buy a brick for $25 and have it engraved with whatever you want. So far, we have one that's been engraved with AAUW. We have another one that's been engraved in memory of Carol Ruckert, our former past member. If you want more information, contact Karen Lewick about this. They're using the money for their 8th grade class to go to Washington, D.C., which is their annual project that is kind of a reward for finishing 8th grade at Continental School before they move out of this school district. Because the students were not able to go last year, the 8th grade students, they're also leaving it open for them to join them on this DC trip. So again, if you're interested in purchasing a brick, you can engrave whatever you want on it, your family name, an organization, whatever you want. Contact Karen Lewick and she's got more information on that. Susan Kirk, our fundraising chairperson, is working hard from Nantucket on reinventing LunaFest or replacing it. She's beginning to put a committee together, and so if you've got any ideas as far as online auctions or whatever that we could do, it has been decided that this event will be online only, not in person, because the COVID virus is still so rampant in so many areas, and so many people are so unwilling to get together and take a chance on it. So again, remember that this is our one fundraiser, and this is what we use to fund scholarships to Pima Community College for young women. And so any help, any suggestions, even if you can't work on it, if you're willing to offer some suggestions, would be wonderful. Also, don't forget to sign up for Arizona AAUW State Fall Forum on November 7th. It is going to be virtual, which means you don't have to travel. You don't have to have a hotel room, which were hindrances to people that wanted to go previously. The Fall Forum takes place on November 7th, which is a Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2:45 in the afternoon. They do take breaks, and it does require registration. The deadline for registration is November 3rd. The topic this year is taking our trailblazing advocacy to the next level, becoming a better champion for all women and girls. The flyer for Fall Forum was included with the invitation for this meeting. So take a look there. If you need any more details about pre-registration or where you go, please call me. I would be more than happy. And again, you get to come as you are. You don't have to dress up, and for the most part, nobody can see you. On November 1st, you will receive your Valley View newsletter. And I really want to give an ongoing thank you to Cynthia Surprise for the quality newsletter that she's producing. Remember, if you want to put something in the Valley View, the deadline is Saturday, this coming Saturday, October 24th, or earlier if possible. Our next meeting is on November 17th, right here on Zoom. Our Arizona AAUW President, Anna Nygren, will be talking about membership and diversity and the challenges that we face. If you have ever heard Anna talk before, she is a dynamic speaker, and we're so lucky to have her not only as our speaker in November, but as our president. Please join us on November 17th. Thank you for staying on for this business meeting. I want to thank Henny, who is our tech host for this one. The tech host duties are being shared by Kathy Davison, Henny, and Judy Willoughby. So Henny, thank you for all the work that all of you put into doing this. And remember, stay safe, stay well, and vote if you haven't done so already. Thank you very much.